point.
Well, thank you so much. It has been an impactful day. As a non-scientist, I've been both educated and alarmed by what we've learned today. The acceleration of the likely overshoot, the appalling inequity that continues to exist where those most vulnerable to climate change have the least resources to protect against their vulnerability, the inevitable complexity of this transition. But actually, my few minutes are going to be spent being optimistic. I'm optimistic because we have leaders like Governor Healy that exist across our country and the world in cities and states and regions. Massachusetts, California are 2 of 24 American states that are taking aggressive action on climate change thanks to their governors, representing over half of our population and half of our GDP. If you look globally, we have hundreds of subnational governments that are exerting similar leadership, many of which are in the room. California is a member of what we call the Under 2 Coalition that includes 270 governments representing over 50% of the global GDP that are focused urgently on working together to implement our climate action targets. And this year, we are focused on fossil fuels, methane, and equitable climate finance. I should mention in the United States, we benefit from, as has been said, the most aggressive climate action president we've ever had. So we've also heard that the solutions exist. I was inspired by our presentation on the sustainable agricultural practices in Rwanda, the decentralized water management in India, the sponge city everywhere approach, the urban greening across our world. I mean, these solutions exist. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of how and how fast. So I want to share a theory of the case from California. And I'll recognize that we are a well-resourced state, and everybody is going to have their own pathway. But I think ours is an encouraging story. We're a large, diverse democracy. We are 40 million people. 1 out of every 4 Californians starts their life outside of our country. That's fuel for our innovation, fuel for our strength. If we're measured in GDP, we're the 5th largest economy in the world. But make no mistake, we've been battered by climate change. 7% of our state has burned up in the last 5 years. We had 2 millennial droughts in the same decade, punctuated by the wettest 3 weeks in our 175-year history, creating catastrophic flooding. We had a regional heat wave that almost knocked out our energy grid. And the second most well-used rail service in the United States from Los Angeles to San Diego is not operating right now because of sea level rise-driven coastal erosion. I lead an agency of 25,000 people focused on all of those topics. And I thought my tenure over the last 5 years would be a lot more proactive than it's been able to be because we've had to be responsive. But even so, I'm very optimistic. We are investing in each of these challenges and under the umbrella of an adaptation strategy that's prioritizing our most vulnerable and relying on science to drive our investments. Because this is an energy panel, I want to focus on another point of optimism, which is the major progress we've made. Now, California has ambitious targets. No news there. I think the glass half full as an international community is net zero is no longer a debate across the world. It's how we're going to do it and how quickly. But I think what we can share is the tremendous progress that we've made. In 2007, we were proud to establish one of the first legally binding requirements to reduce carbon emissions in the world. And the target was to reduce emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. And we met that 3 years earlier, or earlier than 2020, or 3 years early. One key piece of that was a cap and trade system, which put a specific binding lowering cap on sources of stationary pollution and then charged polluters as that cap went down. We've raised $28 billion over the last 10 years as a result of that program, 67% of which has gone to environmentally burdened communities. That's been critical. We're now focused on net zero by 2045, and good news to report there. In California, 1 out of every 4 vehicles sold in California right now is a zero-emission vehicle. We set a target of 1.5 million vehicles in the last governor's administration that was frankly laughed at. and we achieved that target 3 years earlier, or 3 years early. Last year, 60% of the energy that we consumed across the year, again, in an economy as large as California's, was derived from clean energy sources. And remarkable fact I'm really excited about, in the last 30 days, over the last 30 consecutive days, every electron that's powered California in this time has come from clean energy. That's solar, wind, and water. It's actually 59 out of the last 67 days. So for those that suggest that 100% clean energy is not possible, we prove them wrong. A key piece of that has been scaling up significantly battery storage so that we can retire our fossil fuel plants. We've been able to achieve a 1,000% increase in the amount of battery storage we've generated. And our governor, who you'll hear from tomorrow, just announced 10,000 megawatts of battery storage. So I'll also share that, as the governor talked about this morning, this leadership doesn't come at the expense of economic development and prosperity. It's the basis of that economic growth and prosperity. And we're really proud that California's GDP growth has outpaced our national GDP growth in that time. We clearly have our challenges. We have a grid with about 50 gigawatts of energy generation on it. We have to triple that to 150 in the next 20 years while balancing for affordability, which is an issue in California, as well as continued reliability as climate change accelerates. We also have to do that in ways that ensure that this transition doesn't leave folks behind. As affluent as California is in the world, we have tremendous inequity in our state. And if we make this transition and make the same mistakes we've made in the past of leaving folks behind, then as our governor says, we will have failed. I'm really excited that we're investing in regional economic development planning, ground-up planning from 13 regions across California, and then focusing on what their economic development priorities are and how can our climate policies and energy investments actually advance their vision for growth and prosperity. While I have the floor, I want to acknowledge nature-based solutions. Yes, energy, yes, transportation, yes, buildings, but yes, nature. Ecosystems, home, our home, these are our life systems. And I think places like California have focused traditionally on technology, as I said, energy, transportation, buildings, not enough on nature. We are righting that wrong, and I'm really proud that last month we announced our first very specific land use management targets across 8 landscapes in California: forests, farms, deserts, cities, you name it, and all focused on reducing emissions from our land. So in our very specific roadmap to achieve carbon neutrality, our nature-based solutions, our land sector is now a variable. And we're focused on measuring the carbon flux in each of those landscapes and achieving that over time. And I'll submit to this group that it's important that we're all lifting up nature-based solutions, but then let's quantify specific targets for nature-based solutions and then mainstream them into our climate action. I've been so gratified in this job to learn from our tribal partners, Native American tribes in California, on traditional ecological practices. Remarkably, as we heard earlier, some of the smartest, most important things we can do have been done for millennia. And it's been modern government that has disconnected ourselves from those practices. And so I'm so proud that we have done everything from reintroducing beavers, nature's engineers, in places we didn't think they existed historically until tribes helped us understand that, reintroducing prescribed fire or cultural fire on the landscape to reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire. And then just last week, I was really gratified that we transferred $100 million to California Native American tribes for ancestral land return, getting land back to dispossessed tribes for purposes of tribal sovereignty and environmental conservation. And this is working. I mentioned 7% of our state has burned in the last 7 years. Or 5 years. Over the last 3 years, we've spent $2.7 billion on proactive upfront actions to improve the health of our landscape. And while we've got a big assist from Mother Nature over the last couple of years, those investments are working, and we've had moderate wildfire seasons, and we hope that continues. Likewise, on floodplains, flooding, we've learned from others. While we have some gray infrastructure solutions, we're emphasizing and putting more money into nature-based solutions, notching our levees, our walls on rivers to let rivers overtop and flood seasonal floodplains. that's critically important to reduce flood risk on downriver communities, but it's also creating important habitat and recharging groundwater basin. So we're learning from others around the world. I guess I'll lastly say that there is so much to be alarmed and discouraged about, but there's also so much to be optimistic about. And I think the people in this room that I think we're all so thankful that we're convened by His Holiness, the Pope here, have to be truth tellers, but we also need to be solution finders, and I'll say hope givers, right? As this news permeates to people that don't do this like we do, it can be paralyzing. And it's up to us to maintain focus and maintain optimism. I consider optimism not a choice, it's a discipline. It's a discipline we all have to exercise, because what's the alternative? One of my heroes is a climate scientist in the United States named Katharine Hayhoe, who spends a lot of her time trying to explain climate change to people who don't spend a lot of time understanding it. And she talks about we have to maintain hope by taking action. And it's that cyclical loop that's going to keep us moving forward. So I'll lastly say, we can do this. We have to do this. Failure is not an option. And so I'm really thankful to Marcelo, to Ram for convening us here today. I'm excited that you'll have 2 more American governors that will join Governor Healy tomorrow, who are excited to sign this planetary compact. And this needs to be one more step in the journey we need to make together. There's no time to waste. Thank you.